Introducing the Einride grid, a new generation of connected logistics. Stretching 550 kilometers, connecting rail, sea, air and industrial zones across Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah and Al Ain. The Einride grid is a future-proof corridor deploying over 2,000 electric trucks and 200 autonomous electric vehicles, with the combined potential to save 2 million tons of CO2, all enabled by 8 charging stations with 500 charging outlets. We have a substantial challenge ahead, but there is a way forward, together.
Welcome back to the Swedish Pavilion here at COP28. It is the Transportation Day today, and we will be focusing on global solutions to global challenges, focusing on large-scale electrification of global supply chains. We're going to have an interactive session today with panelists along the entire supply chain from a transportation point of view. But before welcoming the panel, I have the honor to present to you the CEO and founder of Einride. Please welcome up Robert Falck.
Thank you. It's such a great honor to be here. And if there is something that really stands out, is the fact that there are so many really motivated people with a great ambition of making a change. We started Einride with the sole purpose of making that change happen. And I think if there's something that we learned over the almost 8 years since we've been building this company, is that there's not an easy solution to what the future holds. But we need to dare to actually push for this change. We need to dare to fail. But we can't be discouraged in making the future happen. We see that new technology has the potential to drive this change by introducing digitalization, optimization, and electrification. There is actually a business case for making this change happen. And not everything when it comes to reducing our CO2 emissions has that. A business case for the change itself. But in mobility, we actually have both the technology and the business case to drive this change. And that's what makes the opportunity in mobility unique. We don't have to trust subsidies, we don't have to trust the government, we don't have to trust ourselves to make this change happen. What's required right now is that we don't stand in the way of making this change happen. When we started in 2015 to think about what we could do, people said that transport with electric vehicles for heavy-duty freight wasn't possible. The people that said were mocked. The people that were pursuing it were considered weird. Since 2020, we've been live in operations with heavy-duty freight transport vehicles. The first one was quite scrappy. That broke down quite a bit because there was new technology. It was not really mature. But we proved that it actually could be done. In 2019, we deployed autonomous electric on public road, transporting goods, proving that that technology could be used to solve the challenge. But the narrative was so strong that this couldn't be done. So the customer doubted it, investor doubted it. A lot of society doubted that we actually could make a change. And we shouldn't kid ourselves the reason why. There are strong economical interests that uphold existing system. That means also that this change will have a lot of challenges from the people that sits on the existing system. But if you have both the business case and the technology, that will help to drive this change and make it happen. And then what's required are individuals and people from the investor side, from customer side, that are willing to stand up and say, let's try something different. let's try something new. I'm very glad that we, over the years, have had so many supporters. We have people that believed in our cause. Maybe even at times we didn't believe ourselves. We stated that we want to do something different. And thanks to all the great people that came and helped us build, we have managed to now prove that on scale, it's possible to transport goods with both manual electric and autonomous electric. And now we also start to prove that it's a massive business case behind it, because technology is maturing, the hardware is becoming cheaper, batteries are coming cheaper. So going forward, the best option for transport is not a diesel engine, it's actually electric. And that's a transition we are right in the midst of. So what we need to do now in this industry is take a hard look in how we can accelerate this transition. Normally in the Western world, the fleet of vehicles are replaced every 4th or 5th year. That's how quickly you change trucks. That means that if we replace 1/3 over the next 5 years, then another 1/3 over the next 5 years, we're going to have a high percentage of electric vehicles in operations. And we're not going to do that because of the need of reducing CO2 emissions. We're going to do that because it's actually a better business case. So we're fortunate enough when it comes to our industry to state that new technology has enabled this transition to be driven by the market itself. But it can't be done without people, individuals, organizations that's brave enough to challenge how things are done now and change from diesel to electric, from manual to autonomous, and that society supports this transition. History has changed, logistics has formed our history. The revolution of sails, the revolution of boats, going across the oceans, introducing rail. All new transport technology has shaped our society, built our cities, decided where we live, and shaped the entire existence. Going forward now, we have a unique opportunity in history. I think it's well said here during COP as well, that we now have the knowledge, the understanding of shaping the society our grandchildren will have to live with. Our grandparents didn't have the understanding, they didn't have the technology, and they did the best they could back then to shape the society we have now. But I know that we can do better, and that's why I get up in the morning, that's why I'm here. I think there's a lot of reason why a lot of people are here, to take the responsibility to create something better. And unfortunately to say, when we look back in 50 years, we will not have any excuses for the society we shaped. So it's now up to us to shape and decide what kind of world our grandchildren will live in. With that, I'm going to hand off to a great panel here to see how we actually can make all this happen. Thank you so much for listening in.
Thank you so much, Robert Falck, CEO and founder of Einride, for those inspirational words and really showcasing that the innovations exist. What we're going to discuss now is how can we scale that? What challenges and solutions are there throughout the entire supply chain? And we're going to welcome some industry leaders and thought leaders to discuss how do we accelerate this and how can we collaboratively work to contribute to reach the targets of the Paris Agreement. So please help me to welcome, first of all, Jari Kauppila, the head of Secretary General Office at the IFT, the International Transport Forum at the OECD. Welcome. As well as David Libatique, the Deputy Executive Director and Stakeholder Engagement at the Ports of Los Angeles. Please welcome up. Nicolas Clerget, the Director of Net Zero Strategy at Heineken. And another Robert from Einride, Robert Ziegler, the General Director in EMEA region. Please welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today in the Swedish Pavilion at the Transportation Day. I would like to start with you, Jari. I wonder, please tell us a little bit how you work. You have several member states here today that you collaborate with in the transportation industry. Could you start by just telling us a little bit how IFTF are working and then how you're working together with your stakeholders to really scale this transition?
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you so much for inviting ITF here. We are an intergovernmental organization that works with 66 member governments around the world on transport policy issues. So we really work with the ministers of transport. So I'm here representing perhaps the government view, but we also have a think tank role where we do a lot of research and analytics about the transportation system itself. So maybe on the way, how we work and why we work on that. I think the starting point is that transport is 1/4 of the CO2 emissions globally. And half of that is from freight. And 70% of that half comes from road freight. So what the CEO just said about a few years ago, no one would have believed when we talk about electrifying trucks. Right now, we are at the situation where we know this technology is scaling up. It is there, it's ready. It is really available. And we know from our work that actually it'll be cost competitive by next decade, even without policy support. But then comes our role is to provide that policy guidance to our member countries to really make sure that they are on the right track and that the companies, the businesses get the right signals from the governments as well to make sure that we move forward.
Thank you so much. And I wonder, what would you see would be the key issues relevant then for really building these large-scale electrification within the global supply chain?
I think there are a couple of major things. The first one is, as I mentioned, policy support, the signals that we give from the governments. And I think those signals need to be clear, they need to be targeted, and they cannot change over time. So you cannot say, now we want to go that direction, private sector invest, and we change our mind and we go to another direction. That's one thing. But I think one of the big challenges is the nexus between the energy and transport. And here we need to make sure that we have a grid available that is capable of producing that electricity that we need for electrifying our supply chains. And as part of that, we actually had yesterday the first ever transport energy ministerial meeting here that we convened together with the International Energy Agency, really trying to bring this together. And you might ask why it's only now. We've been working on energy so long, on transport, but it really has come to this point today where it's absolutely critical to combine these two streams together.
Thank you. And notably, the public-private partnerships are really key here. And Robert, we have already heard from the CEO, founder of Einride, that the technologies exists. And you have, with your innovations, you have the possibility to actually cut the emissions by 95%. And can you tell us a little bit more on your journey and, of course, this fantastic project that you're running here in the region, and how you collaborate with your interconnecting stakeholders to accelerate this?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the right thing here. Interconnected stakeholders is really, that's what we do. We build this ecosystem where you bring a truck, you bring a charging infrastructure that is in the right place at the right time when you need it. We bring a digital infrastructure to integrate it all. Because you cannot run an electric truck like you run a diesel truck, right? You cannot leave the decision to the driver when he wants to charge or when he wants to go to a gas station and fill up the tank. That is not how it needs to work. It needs to be built into the operations. So day by day, you charge a little bit while he's taking a break, you charge a little bit while he's loading, while he's unloading, and that needs to be managed by a digital infrastructure because you need to optimize for the operations, you need to optimize for the charging to make sure that you have great reliability. By optimizing for utilization, you then get great affordability, where you're competitive with diesel actually today already. If we just increase utilization from where the trucking industry is today with below 40%, if we just get that to 50, 60%, we're competitive with diesel. And in the future, we will crush diesel. And companies that don't make the change right now, they will be left with stranded assets. they're going to be having huge fleets of diesel vehicles that nobody wants in the future, because electric is completely going to crush the industry in terms of cost advantage. And then, yes, it's sustainable too.
Thank you. And over to David. You're working at the Port of Los Angeles. And of course, the port plays a really critical and vital role in building these resilient supply chains. And can you tell us a little bit more how you work at the Port of Los Angeles?
Sure. For those of you who are not familiar with the Port of Los Angeles, it is the largest container port in the United States. It's the primary trade gateway for seaborne trade with the Pacific Rim. We have 7 major container terminals, and they handle collectively about 1,800 container vessels a year. And there are about 2,000 pieces of cargo handling equipment that load and unload those ships, and they're serviced by about 20,000 different drayage trucks that are authorized to work out of the Port of Los Angeles and our neighbor Long Beach. And there are about 7,000 trains that arrive and depart from the port complex on an annual basis. So there's a lot of equipment to transition. The approach that we've taken is through what we call our Clean Air Action Plan, which is a comprehensive port emission reduction program where we partner with our terminals, we partner with all the stakeholders to accelerate the development and the deployment of newer technologies. We've started mainly with what's in the port complex, but we've recently expanded that now to look at partnering with ports across the ocean. So we've started with more of these green shipping corridors. It started with a Shanghai green shipping corridor where we take the same principle of create a collaborative framework whereby we can try and catalyze innovation, demonstration of technology, also try different policies to try and demonstrate what's going to compel and accelerate the transition to zero emission technology. We've been helped along by a lot of policies in the state of California. So there is a requirement that now all the drayage trucks be zero emission by 2035. We have a goal as a port of being zero emission cargo handling operations by 2030. So these policies do serve as a North Star for the industry to rally around. So the regulation, the private sector collaboration, all that comes into play.
Thank you. And you're clearly stating the role as a Northern Star indeed, and also the framework that you presented, and not least also your net zero target. And you have also, presented this roadmap and clearly also stating the opportunities and solutions. But what challenges do you see, and how do you working to try to overcome those?
Many. So when you expand the scale from looking at just within the port complex, but now you're going transoceanic, you're dealing with, a broader set of stakeholders. You're dealing with a much more expansive set of different policy, both regulations at the international level, at the national level, at the regional and the local level, different policy objectives at all of those levels as well. And you have to start integrating, now that you're dealing with the system, you have to you can't just deal with introduction of equipment at a terminal. You need to address the broader supply chain impact. You need to address workforce, energy, transportation infrastructure. So there are a lot more, because you're taking a systems approach, you have to be much more integrative about the policies, the policy considerations, take a much more holistic approach. It's more complicated, but at the end, it's where the discussion publicly and privately is going. They've been siloed up to now, and what's great about the green shipping corridors, it's been a forcing mechanism to integrate these policy discussions and make them inform and respond to one another.
Could you elaborate a little bit how these interconnecting discussions have been taking place? In order for us to break the silos between the public and private and the buyers and along the supply chain, what can we learn from the processes that you have conducted so far?
So, for example, we during the last congestion, not the 2020 pandemic-induced congestion, but 2014-15, we had this idea that we can get better use out of existing infrastructure through better sharing of information across the different nodes of the supply chain. we also realized that that also drove emissions reduction. Those efficiencies drove emissions reduction. It wasn't until the pandemic and when we had 109 ships stuck out in the waters of Southern California waiting to be unloaded that the policymakers and our own board and our own the public realized how interconnected efficiency and emission reduction was. And so now that the game has completely changed, the stakes have risen, and so now we have to not just drive transition of the equipment, but we need to take care of those. We need to take care of those supply chain disruption impacts. We need to account for the workforce, make sure that they're being brought along and that there's buy-in from the workforce. We need to make sure that there's grid capacity or adequate. Hydrogen is a big discussion that's taking place right now, so we have to make sure there's adequate supply of hydrogen. Then that's green hydrogen. Yeah. And so all of these are now in the mix. So it's a much more complex discussion, but it's the right discussion to have.
Thank you. And I would like to hear, of course, from the buyer point of view as well, from Heineken. But just before that, just touching upon what you just said, I would like to ask you, Robert, you have several global customers in your portfolio, right? And one of them being Heineken. But can you also tell us a little bit how you are working with ports and logistics sites and how you considering the importance then to breaking the silos and working together? Can you give an example of how you're doing that?
Yeah, the Port of LA is a good example, right? Yeah. I mean, we've just opened a 65-space charging site, massive charging site for trucks there that we can expand up to 120 going forward. So this is how we put out public infrastructure that is partially available also to the public, but basically dedicated to truck traffic in the port, mainly for doing drayage. Obviously for our customers first, so for Maersk, who we're working with in the US to electrify their fleet out of the ports. But then if there is capacity available, then we make that available to the public. And so it is a side effect, basically, of having to build a full ecosystem and making this possible. But it's in collaboration with local authorities and governments to be able to make these kind of things happen. So the way we envision this in the future is that a part of the charging infrastructure will probably be on logistics sites or manufacturing sites of our shippers. But much more of it over the coming years will also be in the public space, where we'll be able to share these assets across multiple shippers and therefore make them more efficient.
Right. And then over to you, Nicolas. Like you have a very progressive agenda at Heineken. You're aiming to be, to reduce your emissions by 90% within your scope 1 and 2, and also be net zero by 2040, if I've understood it right. And you've been working with Einride, and also can you tell us a little bit more about your targets, of course, and how you're working to reach those targets, and how you're also working throughout the entire value chain within the transportation industry and supply chain of reaching those targets.
Thank you for inviting us to talk about our partnership with Einride. So Heineken, you all know the iconic beer, but I think it's important to also tell you the group. So we are present in 60 countries. We have 300 brands, a lot of local brands, and beer has to be produced very close to the consumer. It's a product that we transport a lot of water. So we have 200 sites we have sometimes some very exotic location. So the island of St. Lucia, the Solomon Island, New Caledonia, and a lot of big markets, of course in Europe, but Mexico, Brazil, Vietnam, Nigeria, India. So we have a large complexity, and it's also a lot of opportunities for us, because we can basically be in many markets and start to see what's working, what's not working, what are the right innovation we want to tap into. So back in 2021, for us, during the COVID pandemic, we started to realize that climate will be a very critical, element. Not only just because it's where the world is looking for decarbonization, but also we were facing also climate risk in some of the islands I mentioned. Bahamas is one of the islands we face often hurricanes, and we have to, rebuild our world supply chain on a regular basis. So we announced our net zero goals and focus, of course, to lead by example in our operation. So we want to decarbonize our production and our own logistics fleet by 2030. And we also want to help our suppliers and customers to be by 2040 all net zero. It's extremely ambitious, and we decided to be very bold because we consider that as a brand owner, we have a responsibility to drive our supply chain and our suppliers into this agenda. Now, obviously, when we look at our footprint, we have challenge and opportunity because a beer is made out of raw material like barley. We use glass or aluminum cans. We use, of course, a lot of logistics, and I will talk about it. But we also have an impact at bars and restaurants with fridge and beer equipment. So it's a challenge because you deal with many different industries, but it's also an opportunity to start pushing the low-hanging fruits in the different activities. And when it comes to logistics, it represents 10% of our carbon footprint, but 70% is road transport. So the team has been looking for the past 3 years on many solutions. We are looking, of course, at the North Star like hydrogen, but we realize it's not going to be the solution we need to push right now. We look, of course, at optimizing our network, doing efficiency, but we were really struggling. And we have our own fleet, so we also started to buy some electric trucks ourselves. But when it comes to third-party logistic approach, we could not find a lot of solutions. So when Einride came into the picture, we did one of the fastest projects in our business. We started, I think, 1 year ago. We will be live in January together in Germany. We are also going in Austria. We're exploring many more markets. And it fit quite well our business. You know, one of the key things with beer, it's a stable business. And we are a family-owned company, so we are able to do long-term commitments. And we felt that this agreement with Einride was fitting our philosophy to really start to send a signal to the logistic industry that there are solutions out there. And we need to trigger that demand. We need to show to Einride and others that actually we are ready to make moves, and we need to have much more capacity to basically move this into the right direction.
Indeed, and we've been hearing from the perspectives here, and a lot of, I mean, you're all representing bold stakeholders and with bold ambitions, and also really at the global front line. And also, as a transport buyer, with these targets, and in order for you to touch upon both the solutions, of course, but also the challenges. But what is your perspective on decarbonization, on the global supply chain, and how it can happen at a large scale?
Yeah, I think I will give the comparison where we were 5 years ago with renewable energy. I remember when I started at Heineken, we set up a team to source renewable energy, and we were facing a lot of challenges. The economics are not there, the permits are long, the capacity was not coming on to be enough fast. It was not also a very consumer-friendly market. It was quite complex. And when we look at the logistic world, so 3 years ago, we face a bit the same approach. You know, there is still a lot of mental shift to make. Moving away from a diesel truck will certainly require a bit more rigidity, as Robert explained. You know, we will have to have a very set location for charging. And that also means, you know, that we have to educate, you know, that it will be a different supply chain approach. Then, of course, come the financial aspect that we have to overcome. And I think, you know, with long-term agreements, you can start to see that cost neutrality start to appear. And then scalability will come when you start to see many corporate, you know, starting to push in the same direction. I think the challenge we had in logistics was the cost of decarbonization were not so clear. And when you look at other industry, when you are in my shoes, you know, you look at agriculture or packaging, you're like, actually, I have solution in front of me. Immediately, I can act. Logistics was a bit lagging, so it was difficult to see that, oh, does it make sense to step it now, or should we wait? The problem is that if you wait, there is no signals, so there is no demand, and there is no supply. So you need to start to push to say, look, we are very intentional, we want offers, we want solutions, and we need to start to see this cost going down.
Right. I see that you're nodding, Jari. Do you agree? Is that in line with ITF?
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. I'm nodding because this is exactly the kind of discussion we're having with our member countries, but also we do have a private sector engagement as well, and linking these two together is absolutely crucial here. Yeah. I just want to pick on a couple of points. I think the role of the government here would be going to your direction, is that reduce uncertainty. I really need to reduce uncertainty. The price of carbon. I mean, let's put a good price on carbon that really has a clear indication, message to the private sector that this is where we're going. This is cost competitive going forward. And I think this is where we really need to work. So not aspirations. And one of the things what I hear a lot here in COP, in many years that I've come to the COP, is we have a lot of aspirations and ambitions and goals, but the action is still lacking. And I really have to say that we are running out of time. We have looked at this whole question of decarbonizing across the transportation, and we're not going to reach the 1.5 if we really don't scale up the actions. What is optimistic, what is positive for us is exactly the innovation that is coming from the private sector at the moment. And I do feel sometimes that it is the private sector, of course, that is driving the innovation. It is the private sector is pushing this. But again, they need that signal from the governments that this is the way forward.
Indeed, and really getting the right incentives to scale. And I wonder, David, from your point of view, do you agree with this? And also then the importance of phasing out fossil fuels and subsidies. But how are you working, and how do you see that we need to support the acceleration of these large-scale projects?
Yeah, completely agree with. What we're doing. We're a port authority.
Yeah.
We're doing what we can to create a framework, collaborate with liner shipping companies and the marine terminals to put infrastructure in place. But unless the demand is there from the cargo owners, unless slots on container ships are being purchased and there's a demand for those greener ships, then it's not going to accelerate. You're not going to get to the scale, and you're not going to get to 1.5. So agree on a carbon price. And in lieu of that, we need to, what we're doing with our green shipping corridors is each of these green shipping corridors, we have one with Shanghai, we have one with Singapore, we have a series of green shipping corridors with Japanese ports. Each of these are experiments focusing on different elements, different innovations, and there's only so much that's going to get you before you start getting and driving the demand for those green ships. That's going to be the vector for change. And so I completely agree with your point.
And considering we are here at COP28, where all these interdependent and also interconnecting stakeholders are they're all here, right? And not all of them, but they also have incredibly potential to really sit down and break the silos to find new ways forward. And I think you're all representing the right kind of stakeholders to take on these discussions. But I would also like to hear from you, the importance of then the public and private collaboration and also the regulations. What do you see that the governments can do even more, and what policies would you like to see to enable the scale?
Yeah, I think we talk about the price on carbon, which is, I think, the elephant in the room in this COP. If we really look at infrastructure, this is where we need to start to see movement. When you look at Einride or Heineken, we are signaling demand that we want electrification of trucks. They will be manufacturers, they will be scale up, but we need to have more infrastructure and support to go faster. It's almost like redesigning an electricity grid, to have logistic grid in place. So that's going to be definitely a big challenge, and this is why we need help, because there is a limit to what corporate can do. We are signaling demand, but we need support on the other side to respond.
Yeah. And Robert, representing a company who do have innovations in place and also really requesting also policies to scales, what are your key messages to the regulators, and what incentives do you wish to see?
Well, when we're looking at COP, for us, it's quite important that there is a continued commitment to the 1.5 degree target. We want to see more transparency in carbon reporting, because that delivers a large part of the incentives and the basically planability for shippers to actually implement measures. And last but not least, this is probably the most important part, is we need ubiquitous, renewable, cheap energy.
I would like to hand over the word again to you, David. We're talking a lot, of course, of the importance of the technologies, but also we cannot forget about the societal impact. Can you tell us a little bit on your aspects on that and how you're working on that from the Port of LA?
So one of the enduring values of the port of LA is, you know, we're a 7,500 acre port complex in the middle of a dense urban environment. But to the surrounding communities, it is an opaque, difficult to understand industry. They have no access to it, and really the only way they can access and understand and question what's happening in the complex is through the Port Authority. And so the role we play is we play that convener role. And unless we are actively using our convening powers to bring in the community voices, then we're missing a really key part to make that transition. We're using that convening power to reach out to the community and bring them in. We, last month, had we participated in a community meeting that was hosted by CBOs. And there is a lot of genuine interest and support for this corridor push, for decarbonization of the maritime supply chain. And unless governments and ports and the industry grabs that and meaningfully engages in the community, they're gonna lose a key piece that's gonna support the acceleration of all of this. Same goes for labor, bringing labor into the discussion to make sure as we transition, we're bringing them along. We're not leaving them behind, and the solutions and the technologies we're deploying we're connecting the dots between the jobs they have today and the jobs they're gonna have tomorrow. So those are, from a societal standpoint, two key pieces that we need, that the Port Authority is playing a role, but we can't do it alone.
And to conclude, I would like to ask all of you the last key messages or wishes, not only for the participants in participating here at COP, but also to your interconnected, interdependent stakeholders globally. What are the key messages that you would like to bring on, and how we can take this forward in the joint force moving forward?
That's a tough question.
It's a tough question.
Key messages, I have a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, we have to keep the 1.5 alive, and we have to act on it. This is absolutely crucial. We just cannot slip from that. We talked about the benefits of supply chain electrification, but the cost of not acting is so high that for the societal cost is going to be huge. I think maybe one final thought we didn't touch upon, infrastructure. And I think what we've looked into is that it is less costly to invest now to clean energy, clean transportation, than waiting. The cost of investment will be so much higher in the future if we don't act now.
What was the question again?
Your key messages.
Key messages. I would say, from the port standpoint, it's continued collaboration. I know I was talking about the community earlier, and right now the biggest issue we're facing is trust. I think for a lot of folks who watch this COP process and watch the discussions that take place in the capitals of nations around, there's a lot of cynicism about there's going to be another goal, there's going to be another promise, there's going to be another commitment, and none of it's going to be met. And so we could keep throwing it and being insistent that the 1.5 needs to be held sacrosanct, but nobody trusts it. And so my key message is get into the weeds, get into the ground, start working with these communities and build up that trust. So accountability, transparency, process, blow the doors open, bring more of the public in, more of the community in, and make them a meaningful part of the conversation, because trust is so scarce and it's so perishable.
Thank you.
Well, I agree with my panelist, but I will bring maybe the corporate angle. So as I talk about signaling demands, I think for corporates, going into projects when there is no perfection, is important in this agenda. We cannot delay, we cannot wait for perfection. And often in sustainability project, we try to really get everything sorted. The reality and my experience on renewable is that you need to start, you will get the benefit actually. You will see them way later. It's just that at current, maybe the business cases are not always working well. Maybe there are obstacles with the CFO, but you have to negotiate, you have to see how to convince internally for the benefits which are not factored in the price. So ACT, it's the best way to remove anxiety, doing projects, learning, failing, and going back and putting more projects into the pipeline. And for corporates who are at COP, I think it's important also to share contacts, and share good practice, because actually that was, for me, it's my third COP. That was the first time I actually got people telling me, you need to meet that person to really make a project. Right. Not just to talk and have a nice chat, to really have a meeting after COP, to really start making projects together. So intentionality is very key, and making projects, despite that it's a difficult business case, despite that there is obstacles, but that's the only way to push forward.
Thank you, Nicola. Last but not least, Robert, your final words.
Thank you, Emma. I think I just want to make 2 points. The technology is here today, right? Our biggest competitor in our business is complacency. Going and making the change right now is going to save you from increased costs in the future, is going to save you from stranded assets, is going to invest into carbon-based technologies today. I just don't understand why a company would do that. Sometimes that is driven by my second point, and that is still existing subsidies for carbon products. And I think we just need to do away with those, so that we start seriously going on the path of electrification going forward. This will have so many other benefits apart from saving CO2. It saves poisonous NOx emissions, PM10 particle emissions, noise. I mean, some of our grocery retail shippers, they're realizing that going electric for them means so much more. All of a sudden, they can go into the cities at night. They can stock the stores at night. They can run 3 shifts instead of 2 shifts. That means they need less trucks, and they don't need to be in the morning traffic with everybody else in the cities. So there's so many other benefits coming with going electric that it is just a no-brainer.
Thank you so much. It's been truly interesting to hear your alignment and your all bold, ambitious targets. And to just wrap up this session, thank you so much. We have heard about the importance of accountability, trust, and the importance of involving the community. And of course, public and private collaboration, breaking the silos. And also, innovations exist. We need more public-private conversations and collaborations to drive the right incentives and regulations. Some of them, importance of a price on carbon, phase out fossil fuels and subsidies. And not least, the cost of inaction is way higher than the cost of inaction. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating. The time is now and the race is on. Together, let's pioneer the possible. Thank you.